Hey, people. Who's looking forward to coffee? Yeah? It's always fun to talk about apocalypse, mass destruction, just before coffee in the afternoon. Sorry, guys. I have a big headline again. This is not the new catchphrase. I'm not going to tag this in the LinkedIn and Twitter updates later on that this is the thing now. Internet of Meaning will bypass Internet of Things and so forth. I'm just going to talk about meaning of Internet. You get me? Good. How many of you were here last year? Not many. The year before that? Okay, excellent. So a few of you might know where this is going to. And the rest of you, enjoy the ride. Because I'm looking for companies who are really the survivors of the apocalypse as I see it. And who wants to survive the apocalypse? Anyone? Wow. Okay, the rest of you can go and grab the coffee. But to me, it became evident some time ago when I, in my work, discussed with different companies and how they see their business landscape and the transformation there, and what's happening, and what are the threats and risks in their business. And I identified this kind of meta level of risks that were not evident to these companies. I'm going to talk about those today. So I'm not going to talk to you about new technology or new business innovations today. Really. I'm going to talk to you about old stuff. I'm arrogant enough to talk to you today and walk you through the history of Internet and history of IoT. All right. So, who of you were here when Internet started with the first message in 1969? Was anyone there doing business at that point? Excellent. Or living at that point? There were some. Right, but that was the starting point. So when Internet started, it was just a way to pass messages from one person to another. And it took some time that we even got to the point where this was a global thing, that somebody in the US could send out a message to somebody in Europe. And pretty much that was the sort of main thing of the Internet, getting this electronic messaging thing going on. And it took some years from that point still to get the first web browser that you can sort of have a look at the content that's put online. And again, the point was that you get some sort of way to get to some sort of content that's put online by somebody else. So the Internet was very much a vehicle for passing value from somebody to somebody else, or one person to a group of people, or whatever. And there were many restrictions as well on how you could use this new technology in business, which were only taken away in 1995, which was actually when the Internet started flourishing. And before 1998, was anybody there when Google came around using the Internet? So you must know how hard it was to find anything of relevance using Alta Vista, Look Smart, Lycos, and the other services. And Google changed all of that. That made search intuitive, and you could actually find what you were looking for in the Internet. A huge change that came around 30 years after the Internet came to be. And I'm getting to a point here. Then, as I said earlier, before this point, Internet was pretty much just a vehicle for passing on value that was created outside of the Internet to the other end of the Internet. So you had all these email messages, you put content online that you had prepared for other people to see, and at some point Of course, there were these bulletin board systems that existed even before internet, but the main point was sort of messaging between humans. But at some point, when there was enough sort of facilitating structures within the internet, the idea of the Web 2.0 came about. And what that meant was that the interaction can actually happen within the system, and we can start creating the value within the internet. And with the coming of Facebook, a lot of things changed fundamentally. Before that, one of the main ideas of the communication in the internet was anonymity. Nobody knew that you were a dog in the internet. And that all changed when we came to Facebook. At that point, even as myself, I never used my real name in the internet before Facebook. And that changed a lot of things. How many of you have linked out services outside of Facebook so that the Facebook authentication is actually the way that you identify yourself to that third-party service? Like Spotify or whatever. You are using Facebook to sort of log into another service. Maybe you didn't get the question because there were so few to answer. But in any case, Facebook has changed things in a way that nobody foresaw when Facebook came around. It enabled things like authentication to third-party services because everybody was in the Facebook using their real name. And this has created an ecosystem that started burgeoning pretty rapidly after Facebook came around. Then we had Airbnb, we had Spotify starting in 2008, 10 years ago. And we started having more and more content that was specifically built, services built specifically using the internet framework, that you have this identification methodology, and you can have this service running on top of the internet. There was nothing outside of it. Previously, it has been more like we just connect these two people and the messaging between them using the internet as a framework. And now you have services running within the sort of same system. And we have come to the point where now it's pretty sort of, of course, working at Vincit, I picked Hesburger. And you might think that, okay, it's like pretty boring example. It's like a mobile app. But when you really think about the Hesburger digital platform, it's a tool to bypass the cashier transaction phase when you're buying burgers. And it enables, for Hesburger, the analytics of how these burgers are consumed and purchased by 1 million Finnish people. That wouldn't be possible outside of the internet. Internet is what enables things like this new business model for Hesburger for selling hamburgers. It didn't exist before. So the value proposition of the internet has evolved tremendously in 50 years, but also in 20 years and in 10 years. And we don't know the end. Because right now, can you imagine? We have services like the V Foundation, which is designed to prevent the youth to lose their lives. It's a service designed specifically to help the youth to find the path forward in their lives when they're in a difficult situation. In the internet. You can't execute a service like the V Foundation by just having these messaging systems. It's not possible. Think about that. The internet is saving lives. Not by conveying some messages from people in need to somebody who's going to help them, but actually running the service, leveraging all the infrastructure, all the data available online, bringing it into a context that's user-friendly, intuitive for the youth to use. We couldn't have come here 10 years ago simply because the data was not there. The network infrastructure was to an extent there. but the user interface technologies were not mature enough and so forth. So the evolution of the internet, all the time, what we see, the value proposition is still growing. We don't know what becomes possible in the future, but we know one thing, which is my main point today as well. But let's take a sidestep then and reflect on the IoT, the Internet of Things. There are similarities here, which I will discuss, but also some key differences in where we are at the moment, which are, I think, relevant today if you have been paying attention to all the other speakers today who are talking more about technology. So for me, I think what we can use as the starting point of the machine-to-machine interaction and Internet of Things was the Metritech company who was providing these automatic meter reading services using the existing internet infrastructure. So they were providing, for example, for electricity companies, the possibility to get the metering data to their central systems. Pretty high tech. And already in the 1982, we had the first Coke machine connected to the internet. Think about that. Almost 40 years ago, we had Coke machines on the internet. But this was the sort of similar phase to what I described as internet in the phase of just being the sort of vehicle for conveying messaging between parties. This was the same phase. And the term Internet of Things or Internet for Things came about in 1999, 20 years ago, when people realized that, hey, this is actually like, we have these things, and they are using the internet in pretty much the same way that people are using the internet at that time. So it was a messaging system for things. And things started changing in 2009 when there actually were more machines connected to the internet than people. And we also started talking about Internet of Wearable Things as a spin-off of IoT. Fitbit came to be, for example. And from that point onwards, the IoT, which used to be this sort of very industrial system of machines talking to each other, came closer to the consumer. The ecosystem of IoT started coming closer to our skins, even under it. Samsung was maybe the first with Samsung Gear, 2013. There started to be these services coming into people's homes, like the Virtual Life system, which is measuring the water flow in apartments. And IoT has become more commoditized. It's like, if you're not leveraging IoT already, you have lost the train. Apple Watch came in 2015. And then, for me, what I see is that how do we then start seeing this value creation within the IoT systems? So if the key point of the evolution of the internet was the point when value was started to be created within the system instead of outside of it, I think one point was when we started seeing these, for example, fleet management systems, leveraging the IoT, where the data gathered started to be analyzed and used in forecasting. But also if you think cases like Juhlapesu, which is like, it's an automated car washing system. And wash lanes have been automated in the 50s already. So what's the big point there? The point was that leveraging all the possibilities of IoT, all the sensoring, optical reading, and so forth, bringing all those things together, enabled a system where you now have a company, Juhlapesu, which has, 400 wash lanes across the globe, and there's 2 people working in the company. And the value is created only and completely by the service automation leveraging IoT. So as I see it, we are now starting to see the same kind of business and value proposition maturity in the IoT as we saw already 10 years ago in the internet. And these has implications. Toyota built a fish farm last year, completely automated, running on its own, pretty much based on sensor data and so forth, taking care of the fish, creating true value for humans based on full automation. And this is the future. These are poor examples of the apocalypse that's coming. The level of automation, if you think about, we are now automating car wash lanes. We don't need people selling the tickets to car washes anymore. We don't need people to tend for the fish when we grow fish. Think about that kind of future. And having my history ranging from maybe from the mid-90s and seeing all this, I came to the realization that, okay, seemed to me that from the technical perspective, most of the trivial problems have really been already solved. And now it's a case of implementation. And if this is true, if there are business drivers, as we see them, for complete automation of the business, why wouldn't we do it? And when we have these fully automated businesses, what does that mean? That means that any mediocre company will cease to exist, because their business landscape will be fully automated. So how do you survive? There's two angles to this. If you look at the previous examples from the internet and Internet of Things and what things have become, you see that outside of these systems, what really creates value, think about Spotify, Airbnb, the APIs that they have between the systems. The main API, of course, for most of these is API from Facebook towards the other system to provide these authentication solutions. But there are other ways to collaborate between these solutions. And these actually expand the value proposition of the internet. The key is better facilitation of the collaboration between the value-creating partners. And being left out of that, of course, is the antithesis of survival. So, another angle, if you believe that anything can be automated, and we are seeing that already, we have many cases where things that we thought that might be safe from automation, we have already automated those. So if you believe this, how can you become unique? How do you compete with the machine? And also, if the collaboration between organization and businesses is the new norm, what will you bring to the table? Why would companies want to collaborate with your business? Can you explain? Why? If collaboration is the norm, you need to participate, and for participation, you need to be able to state your purpose. And the line of thinking that I have went through, and why I'm here today, is try to get and convey this message to you, which I'm getting to shortly, is that the real risk is the isolation. And isolation is usually because you're unable to state your purpose clearly to your partners and to your clients, and also the inability to define the purpose of their existence within your ecosystem. And isolation precedes extinction. But there are ways to survive. As I said, I'm not going to talk to you today about technology. No new business models. But there's one thing that I have found which is at the core of the survival. And this is what I want you to focus on when I leave the stage. The one idea that makes you survivalist and a survivor in the upcoming mass destruction is this: the realization that there's no competitive advantage in doing what everybody else is doing. If you keep this in mind, you don't need the strategy. This is what creates a culture of survival for your company. And I want to help you. Thank you.